One of the reasons we succeeded in the early days, despite being first-time founders, is we just used up everything we had. And that came to a head in an investor board meeting where I said I was going to do something and I just hadn't done it. There was this one chat where we were trying to figure out what my role going forward would be. And Ian, who is my best mate, just stopped me and was just like, you don't have to be at this company anymore. And I was like, oh, all right, maybe I should leave. And it was absolutely the right call.
How do some of the world's sharpest minds start their day? By putting their brain first. And it's not just our secret leaders who kick off every day with heights. From Stephen Fry to best-selling author and fellow podcaster Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, who give us rave reviews. So if you care about your brain's health and cognitive potential, think heights. Listeners can get 25% off their first month with the code LEADERSHEIGHTS at www.yourheights.com.
Today we're in a rather different location. We're recording this episode from a houseboat on the Grand Union Canal in central London. Who on earth lives on a houseboat in central London, you may ask? Well, none other than startup entrepreneur and team builder, co-founder of the awesome Songkick and Silicon Milkroundabout, Mr. Pete Finlay, formerly known as Pete Smith, formerly known as, well, Prince, R.I.P. Having graduated from Cambridge in 2005, Pete Finlay went on to become the co-founder of Songkick in 2007, alongside Michelle Yu and Ian Hogarth. If you haven't heard of Songkick, it's the largest concert discovery service in the world. No starting small for Pete. The idea for Songkick could be traced back to Pete's habit of throwing summer festivals in his back garden during his uni years. He's quoted as saying that he grew up in the middle of nowhere with a big backyard, perfect opportunity to make lots of noise and, of course, experiment with sourcing music. I mean, he could have just stopped there. But not content with his success, Pete went on to create Silicon Milkroundabout, the best free tech jobs fair and recruitment events for startups. Pete created this to face the challenge fledgling entrepreneurs find when it comes to hiring the right people. In a traditional, bigger corporate company, you'd be involved in hiring a lot later down the line than in a startup. So Silicon Milkroundabout helped showcase the skill set of young entrepreneurs, but, that in itself has gone through a tough journey, as you'll come to hear. One of the pioneers of the London startup scene, specifically Tech City in East London, welcome to today's awesome guests and, yes, his dog.
So, Pete, to break the ice, are you ready for our quickfire round?
I'm ready.
So, in a world where there is no Songkick, favourite music product?
I have to say Glastonbury.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think concerts themselves are the best music product.
Okay, so live experiences, and therefore Glastonbury's your favourite.
Glastonbury is just tip-top.
I think Glastonbury's my favourite too. Favourite band?
Maybe Nirvana.
Maybe? Who else?
Well, I thought of like some of the old greats like Louis Armstrong and Aretha Franklin as well. And then like my like 90s little nexus of Pearl Jam, Lemonheads, Nirvana.
So Fleetwood Mac?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely, yeah.
Strike me as a Fleetwood Mac guy. Yeah. Favourite song?
I'm just not going to answer that one. Can't be done. I tried and I just can't. I can't do it.
App you're using most on your phone right now?
I'm using an app called Marco Polo, which is you send little video messages to each other back and forth, which I think it's for millennials.
Okay.
I use it with all my friends who've got children and catch up with their like babies' lives. It's quite fun.
So what is it, like Instagram stories kind of, but just for like a direct set of friends?
It's yeah, well, you can do like groups, like WhatsApp groups, and you're just like pinging back videos to each other.
Okay.
And they're not hosted on your phone, so you stream them, but you can see the history of the streams. You can go back and watch these little videos. It's quite cool.
Yeah, fair enough. Operating your own vibe or advising and mentoring others to build their dreams?
I like both, but I definitely get more from doing my own thing.
Yeah, fair enough. Most inspirational person in the world to you?
Maybe it's going to be just as a group, like some of those astronauts that just like balls to the wall went to the moon and stuff. That group of people and everybody that kind of backed them through that process, they were like doing something that was really just unbelievably dangerous and extraordinary.
I mean, on the topic, have you ever heard that inspirational team building quote that when they went to the space station back in the day, at Houston, and they were like, this is what a mission feels like. So they went and asked everyone what they do. So they go and ask the janitor, what do you do? So I'm helping put people on the moon.
That's awesome.
That's like a
I
mission.
think that whole thing, I mean, there's a wicked TV series called From the Earth to the Moon, which is a dramatisation of the space race, and it drives into all these different areas of NASA and how they got there and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's just so hyped up for it.
Yeah.
mission-driven. Houseboat life or, normal?
I've got to move off this thing at some point.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, well, I don't think you can have more than a couple of young kids on it.
How long have you been in this for?
We've been doing it for about 5 years, and I do have this idea where we could create a pop-top bedroom for the kids above our bedroom, like a camper van. Yeah. But I think even that is starting to get into the realm of we've got to get a flat, really.
Yeah.
So
I guess at some point you stop being that it's quite cool, Pete does that, to don't go see that weirdo. He's got that weird bunk bed for his kids up there. Right, let's get straight into it. So every story starts with a backstory. What's yours? You are now Pete Finlay. So who was Pete Smith?
I grew up near Bedford, near Rich, I think, and was one of 5 kids. Had pretty lovely childhood. Had lovely houses and gardens and adventures and things like that. And had a wicked group of friends growing up. We're all still top friends. Probably a group of 6, 7 guys and 2 or 3 girls that we're all just incredibly good friends all through our teens.
Still friends?
Yeah.
Nice.
And then uni, went to Cambridge, did law, and dragged my heels a bit. Took a gap year, and then I took another gap year, and then I took another gap year. And
whilst you were at uni?
I took a gap year before, during, and then after, and was still kind of dragging my heels into my mid-20s and not really doing much with my life.
And is that because you just didn't like academia or what?
I don't know really. I think I love traveling, so I was always going traveling, and whenever I got a chink of overdraft, I'd be like, right, cool, let's buy a flight to Thailand or something like that. Yeah. And I remember going to see my bank manager and getting a third overdraft and things like that. And
well, at least you're doing original things like going to Thailand.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, at the time, nobody was going to Thailand, man. There was only
can only imagine
5 million British teenagers there.
It's about the same time The Beach came out, right? So yeah, kind of ruined that.
Yeah, I discovered that, but that was quite a small book until I read it, and I told everyone about it. And then...
Okay, so from your backyard to helping people find Beyonce, we're here to hear the story, obviously, of Songkick. So where does the journey actually begin?
Well, Ian, co-founder at Songkick, so he and I had been best mates at uni and had always said, we want to start a company together. We didn't know what that company was going to be, but we thought we would go away, do some work, learn about how to be professionals and learn from people who knew more about business and work than we did, and then cycle back in a few years' time and be like, right, we're ready, we've learned what we need to learn, let's start a business. And
was he going away at the same time as you, or did he just do his 3 straight years?
He was doing engineering, so we graduated at the same time. Then he went off and did a year and a half for Bain as a management consultant, and I wouldn't say I was drifting is a bit strong. I did law, and I had figured out pretty much immediately that I didn't want to do corporate law as a career. And that actually, bizarrely, you do law at a top university, you'd think it gives you loads of options. It does give you loads of options, but actually in the moment, it feels like in the crucible of everybody getting their training contracts and going off and joining Clifford Chance sort of stuff, you actually feel a bit shiftless and unanchored, because everybody else is I know what I'm doing in my life, and you're I don't want, all you know is you don't want that. So I reacted quite, I sort of bucked against that, went and worked for a little immigration law firm in Hackney, and then I ended up working for my dad's company as a salesman for about a year. He's an entrepreneur, and he's been running his business for about 25 years, a successful software consultancy, and so I was sort of feeling my way out of corporate law, which was almost presented as the only thing you would ever want to do if you did law at Cambridge. Yeah. I remember being this, 4 or 5 months from graduating, and everybody just being oh, what training contract did you get? And I'd be I don't have one. And they'd look at you with this kind of pity and sort of...
Surely you just say, I'm just going to go fake one in Thailand. Right. So whose idea was Songkick? How did you guys all meet? Because there's a third co-founder in the mix as well, right? And then what was the actual original proposition? How far did you stroll from that first idea?
So we were a couple of years out of uni, and Ian calls me up and he said, I'm done. I hate my job. I'm not learning anymore. I don't think... I've been speaking to people who run companies, and they've all said the same. It's you learn on the job. Let's just quit our jobs and do it. And we pretty much did. I took another couple of months to fully commit to it. But we both quit and just started working without an idea. And we had a bit of savings, but it was more just right, let's just crack on, because, we'll just do this. So Ian was the impetus, and I jumped on board and we didn't have an idea. So we started pinging back ideas with this big Word doc, which we probably still got somewhere. There was just random ideas, like really, some of them really good and probably...
X for Y, etc.
Well, yeah, except there wasn't many X's at that point.
Yeah, there wasn't any Uber or Tinders.
It was like early 2007, so a lot of the models had... and a lot of the models had failed, actually. So it was like, you don't want to be Friendster because, like, and then there's this upstart Facebook that, like, actually all your friends are using, but it's not for people who weren't at this uni and all this kind of stuff. So there weren't that many models, but we did have, like, a whole bunch of ideas, like... Well, anyway, they were probably made a bunch of people...
What was your worst idea?
I think the idea that I would have disliked doing the most was this like capacity mapping in Chinese factories so that you could get stuff created, in the 7-week window when this factory was like changing around its flooring or something. You could use this space or spare capacity or something. I would have hated to travel. I think that would have been a terrible idea.
Yeah, okay.
Probably is a great idea.
So you had a list of ideas that you were probably never going to do, but they were ideas. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of your process.
Yeah, and then I think Ian was in Singapore because he was still stuck in Singapore until the end of the tax year. He got hammered for tax. So he was drunk chatting to this guy late at night, and this guy was just going on and on about live music and how great it was, and Ian and me and most of our friends love music and live music. And then Ian called me and was like, let's do something in music because it's going to be much more fun than this other stuff we're batting around. So we created this massive spreadsheet basically of all the existing and startup plays in music and like what were they trying to tackle, who were the users, what were the revenue model, this kind of stuff. So it was a very like process driven period of idea creation, and eventually zeroed in on live as growing sector, not being disrupted, in fact being strengthened by the reduction in revenue of recorded music and in particular, the rise of the iPod and not the iPhone at that point, but the iPod and MP3s made it very accessible to get people's music collections at the time. So it was a iTunes plugin that zipped in what you'd listen to, and then tell us your address and we'll tell you where the concerts are.
So that was the original idea.
That was the original idea, and Songkick still is pretty much that at its core, and that's the value proposition that the users sign up for. And
yeah, because of course, actually, just for anyone that doesn't know, can you just give the elevator pitch of what Songkick actually is?
So Songkick is, I think, one of our taglines over the years was like, 100,000 concerts in your pocket. So wherever you are in the world, we know you and we know your music tastes, and we can tell you what concerts you're going to be interested in. And of course, when you scratch underneath the surface, there are many ways in which you can miss a concert, including missing the on sale, including the tickets selling out, including just being hammered by the fees and deciding you can't afford that concert. So there were lots of ways in which we got people to concerts and worked on getting people to concerts. And the other thing is there were lots of ways we had to figure out how to monetize the business because it was a difficult business to monetize.
Yeah, because the margin, I guess, by that point is very slim. But let's not get onto that just yet. How big was the margin you pretended it was going to be when you first pitched investors?
Well, we didn't really know anything about the live music industry, and luckily neither did a lot of our tech investors at the time. So it was very much so we started by joining Y Combinator. So it was like the 5th or 6th batch that Y Combinator had ever done. Yeah. And Ian had been reading Paul Graham's essays and was like, let's apply to this thing. And I was like, cool, whatever. And the deadline was in 4 or 5 days or something like that. So we did a couple of all-nighters, got this thing written and sent off, got flown out to the Valley for an interview. I think we probably came across as like very intense young men, and they just trusted that we knew music perhaps, and we got on. So a lot of our early investors, the angels we brought on, were tech focused, and it felt at the time like the tech wave was definitely going to disrupt live music. So, what was Ticketmaster? It was this terrible old website. Why do they charge all these fees? And because we didn't actually have the answers to some of those questions, the pitch that Songkick would be the solution was actually relatively plausible. It was like, really it's about getting tickets in the hands of the fans that care the most. There's the whole issue of touts and people buying up hot tickets and selling them on for a like multiple of the face value, and it's the touts that take that margin. And it's all a bit of a mess. Yeah, so it was still a mess. StubHub, Viagogo as platforms for enabling professional touts to make millions of pounds a year.
What do you think of those kind of sites?
Do you have a professional and a personal point of view towards this?
Well, look, the bottom line is Ticketmaster, Viagogo, StubHub, they're all fronts for the shenanigans of the bands, their promoters. Yeah, basically they all sit on top of this industry where it's all about fighting, scrapping for margin. And so there's a very simple solution these days to touts. And Adele does it. We used Songkick to do it. She used our platform to do it. You issue digital tickets and you offer a 100% refund if you can't come. And then if you're in demand, then you sell your ticket to the next person in the queue. So there is simply a solution. So you got to ask yourself, why don't these bands do it? And it's because they make money.
Yeah, okay.
They make more margin and they make more money. And the other thing is, it's not just the bands driving up. The bands try and take nearly all of the face value of a ticket. So that doesn't really leave anything for the venue, for the promoter, for the ticket vendor. So that all starts getting added on as this extra fee. And so when you get an opportunity to take a ticket and sell it on for a big profit, and you can do that at some sort of industrial scale, then all those players get interested again. And they're like, oh, do you reckon we could just keep 20% of the inventory back and sell it on StubHub like we're fans that can't go to the concert, and then we'll split the profits 5 ways or whatever. So it's just a bit locked in. It's a bit locked up. I mean, it's more than a bit. It's just locked up.
We'll come on to that model part, I guess, a little bit later. But so do you actually remember, just bringing it back to this, do you remember your first pitch to investors? You're there on YC Demo Day. Like, what's that like as an experience? Because, Paul Graham's British, but it's like a whole American cultish startup thing, right? It's a badge of honor.
Yeah, the whole thing was a great experience. I think the pace at which the teams were working, and us included, on a 3-month program, and the sort of the raising of the bar in terms of what we were actually going to set out to achieve was transformative for us and really intense. I should mention at this point, so at some point in those 3 months, Ian's then girlfriend, now wife, Michelle, joined us as the third co-founder.
Yeah, okay.
And then a fourth quasi co-founder, Phil Cowans, who's now CTO at Nested. He was with us by the end of the Y Combinator summer. So we're kind of like this team of 4 by the end of that summer.
So the team of 4 finish Y Combinator. You come back full of high spirits, very excited to get cracking on. Then what? Where do you find your first office? Like, what's the next part of the...
So we pretty immediately got investment from Saul Klein, Saul and Robin Klein, here in London. And
what was your experience with them, like, initially?
So
very swift and easy?
It was, we reached out to Saul, but we just found him online, and he seemed to, him and Robin just seemed to really have their finger on the pulse. They'd already made a bunch of investments in companies that we respected, like Moo and Mind Candy, and so it was a no-brainer to reach out to them. And Saul emailed back within like 10 minutes, which is basically how he always is. It's like, bang, yeah, okay. And he was like, I'm in Boston on Friday. Let's meet at this hotel lobby. And we talked him through it, and he said, great, don't move to the Valley, come back to London. I want to talk to you guys. I want you to convince us to invest in you, and we did, and it was all very smooth. And Saul's been like, he's just a great investor, I think.
And you've never had any issues? You're still friends? You still stay in contact with your investors? Still, yeah. I think there's probably investor relationships I don't feel the need to invest in, because maybe don't get on with them as well as I do with people like Saul. Okay, so take us through the first year of Songkick, right? So you've now got your money from, actually, in terms of journey, you've gone to YC, doesn't get any better than that. You've got Robin and Saul Klein, also doesn't get any better than that. Where's your first office? Who are your first employees? What's that first year look like? How did that growth kick in?
So we just threw ourselves at it. We worked 6 days a week. We had crazy systems, like we had rotating days off, so that there was always like 6 people in the office rather than like days when there was only 5 or so. Crazy stuff. We lived in this, we worked out this little flat in Spitalfields, which was awesome actually. It was like, had a kitchen, big main room, a couple of bedrooms where we put interns and like I think at peak we had like 25 people in that.
He means professionally.
Well, we always paid our interns.
No, I meant a couple of interns that you stick in the bedrooms. Just straight in.
Definitely.
You like music?
Thanks for the clarification. and that was great. That was proper startup feel, and it felt like we were one of the only teams in London kind of operating like that. It was quite. It was. I mean, there were. We met many founders who over the years that were living that story at the same time as we were, but we weren't a community. We didn't really know each other, so it very much felt like we were like feeding off what was going on in the valley and kind of translating it to our little tiny one startup world in London.
Yeah, fine. And how quickly did you get traction?
So we had launched within 6 months and had launched like another big version of the site within another 6 months, and SEO immediately became like a really big growth driver for us. We were, basically we had a decent product, and we put a lot of effort into growth and also a lot of effort into kind of being part of there was a lot of music blogs at the time. I think there still are loads of music blogs, but there were loads of independent ones, like thousands of independent ones. So we put a lot of effort into building out those relationships. So they would embed our widgets in their blogs and all this kind of stuff.
And how many people did you have in the team? And like, what was your process for hiring people? What is it that made someone a Songkick person? Who was in charge of that like cultural hiring aspect?
So we the three of us definitely shared it, but I led on the process. And I think that probably what happened was we had an extremely high bar and a really rigorous filter, which meant we'd rarely hire people that didn't work out. But if they didn't work out, it all happened fairly quickly.
Right.
We realised and it was like, this isn't working. So
is it fair you'd say you hired slowly and then fired quickly?
Yeah, but we hired slowly because we weren't very good at hiring. That was actually, it wasn't that, we were running a great process, but our filter was our bar was just so high we couldn't get the people. It was more like our bar was super high and I just wasn't very good at hiring.
When you were testing like different areas for the product in the start, where does business model come into this? Because obviously we've talked in the past and that was probably the most stressful part of your whole business, because where do you get the margin in music?
It's difficult to say. I mean, one thing that, I don't want to sound like we did much wrong in terms of our decision making around fundraising, because we were very successful at fundraising. We raised from brilliant investors, and the business continued to grow in its ambition and scope.
How much did you raise in total?
Well, by the time, so I left Songkick after 5 years. By that point, we had raised about $20 million.
Yeah.
We continued to raise, I think, probably another 15 or so on our own, and then we merged with CrowdSurge, when they took our name. And they themselves had raised something like 20 or 30, and then that entity continued, that merged company continued to raise money over the last few years as well. So I think
north of $100 million.
Maybe not quite that much, but like not far off. Yeah, a lot of money. And so one thing we had was we had our initial our jumping off point, which was iTunes history / like listening habits combined with where you live and the best concert database in the world. The ticketing links out of that, which we made a cut from if we had an affiliate deal. So we had this little engine of like growth, great product and revenue. Then we started to build out loads and loads of rich content around past concerts as well. And we had this idea to be the IMDb of live music. So every concert that's ever happened, you could find the set list, maybe even the bootleg recording of it. And it just sounds like a fabulous idea.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And it was great for things like SEO and like a very, very like engaged kind of nerdy user base. But it turns out it wasn't like movies. Like there isn't the appetite for that kind of rich content going back to, one of Razorlight's gigs in 2007 or something like that.
Okay, fine.
We kept the lights on through raising investment for several years.
Sure.
And we spent that money focused on great user experience and growth.
Yeah.
And we didn't focus as much on business model for several years. Now, when we did turn on,
probably encouraged by your investors to do that.
It was definitely like the style at the time. It was like grow fast and figure it out later. But I think also we had more faith than we perhaps should have that there was going to be like at scale there was a way to kind of increase margin. Anyway, long story short, there wasn't as much money as we thought there was to be made. So Songkick then had to begin a process of how are we going to get we're going to blend in extra business models and new ways of making money to our, great product that sends you off to buy a ticket. That, we needed to figure that bit out. So we started promoting our own concerts. We had Songkick Detour, which was like Kickstarter for concerts. So if the band is not coming to your town or city, you can basically prepay. You can pre-buy a ticket, and a critical mass that tips over and they come. We ran several of those concerts. They were really cool.
That sounds awesome.
And we found that, for example, when a band has like they've plotted like a 60-day tour over the course of 5 months or something, they will actually have quite a lot of downtime where you can insert a kind of detour concert, and they'll make more money. Everybody's happy. The fans are pumped because they made it happen. All this kind of stuff. But again, promoters have got a pretty good handle on their local market, and they're pretty good at plotting like how big a venue they should book for a band and all this kind of. So I guess we're not saying we weren't reinventing concert promotion. We were supplementing bands revenue, so we weren't like critical to the industry still. And then artist ticketing was the sort of the big piece, which is actually where we ended up getting into a head-to-head with Ticketmaster.
Right. Okay.
And so CrowdSurge, our sister company that we merged with, their big insight was bands are increasingly able, especially when they've got a bit of leverage, to hold back ticket inventory for their tours so they can give to their fan clubs. And the bigger the band, the more percentage of their tour they can hold back. And then they need a platform for selling those tickets. Yep. And CrowdSurge was that platform. And they would take their relatively small booking fee on top, and it was pure margin, and everybody was starting to make money again out of tickets. And even though these tours were locked down in Ticketmaster venues, and when we merged and went for it, we were doing really well. We were getting massive tours. Adele was the biggest one we did, but Ticketmaster just shut us down. In that area, they were like, we are not happy with this happening, and the lawsuit is ongoing. I mean, I think that the business itself suffered a lot from how Ticketmaster reacted to us growing and becoming a force, and you can't get that back. Like they actually did like significant damage to the business.
Do you read the board reports, like anything like that?
I do. I keep an eye on it. So, but only an eye on it. Like I basically left Songkick in 2012 after 5 years, and my involvement like very much dropped off a cliff.
And your co-founder still there?
No, Ian and Michelle were there until 2016, 2017.
Okay.
So we merged with CrowdSurge, and then their leadership team took the business forward.
Right. Okay.
Then by that point we've been doing it. Well, Michelle and Ian have been doing it for nearly 10 years, and it's.
What is the highest high you can remember on your journey?
I think it was incidents where you realise, like, even though you're only a startup, you've like penetrated through to the very top of the industry. Like this is probably the most sort of jarring moment for me in the early days of Songkick was getting an email to my BlackBerry from this guy called, or the guy on the chain is a guy called Irving Azoff, who is like a power broker extreme in live music. Like he represents artists, he manages them, promotes their tours. Like he's a real, like, he throws his weight around a lot. And he'd got wind of us and was just like, we want to talk today. He's over in California, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. I was at Asda, and he was like, we want to talk. And we didn't obviously like jump on the phone, because it would have been an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
And what would we have said to this man? We were like 6-month-old startup with like nothing really to show for that in the early stage, apart from like a product with a few users. So, but it was that kind of moment where I felt this like blooming kind of like pride and sort of.
Like, because you were the thorn in the side for someone so powerful. Is that basically when you realised
like,
you had something?
I was like, bloody hell, 6 months ago, I wasn't even working on this business. It was almost like a moment of clarity, like what you can achieve with a startup that you can't achieve in a normal job.
What was your motivation for leaving the business in the first place? And I guess connected to that, did you suffer from burnout? Were you just mentally exhausted? What's the story?
We've talked about this now, so I know I suffered from burnout. So,
but actually, in fairness, in my defence, coming back to it, I actually thought the burnout was from Silicon Milkroundabout, not Songkick.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Luke here, co-founder of Contour Space. sorry to interrupt this awesome podcast, but I just wanted to tell you a bit more about us. We're a startup ourselves, helping awesome companies find amazing office spaces from start to finish, whether you're looking for a couple of desks to your next big HQ. We take care of the whole process from start to finish, and our service is completely free. Check us out on contour.space.
I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons we succeeded in the early days, despite being first-time founders, is we just used up everything we had, hitting what we felt, and actually what were good goals, milestones. Like, we made progress as a startup, but it ragged us as founders. And I think probably of the three founders, I was also in a role where I was doing the COO role, which was just simply not as like at the coalface with the users, not out in the building meeting cool investors and potential partners and stuff like that. I feel like there was a point in time where, you know, I felt like I wasn't enjoying the work I was doing, and that almost just from that point on, the wind just went out of my sails, and the burnout caught up with me. I felt I was just ticking over, and I was doing basically a really poor job. And Ian's my best friend, and so I hesitate to say he like carried me for a period of time, but I think, to be honest, him and Michelle were probably like, oh God, I wish Pete would like get his shit together, you know. And that came to a head in an investor board meeting where I said I was going to do something and I just hadn't done it. It was like a pretty important piece of work to figure out whether we could make money off merch or trade e-commerce or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know it was important, and I know that, you know, 24 hours before the board meeting, Ian's like, we need to get that slide together about the e-commerce angle, and I was like, I just haven't done it. So, you know, again, he's trying to cover for me, and then the investors just said, hey, look, what the hell's going on with Pete? Where's his mojo gone? So that was a real shock to the system. All of us woke up and were like, right, okay, we've got to sort this out. You know, we've got to sort out what's going on here. And, you know, I did like immediately pull my britches up and start fixing it. And I also...
Is that necessarily the right reaction?
I think it was then, because I just wouldn't have wanted to leave at that point. You know, I mean, it was really a question of like, well, we have tons to do, and if we've got a COO co-founder who's not getting the job done, then we've got to deal with that. So It was like, I would rather, at that point, I knew what I wanted to do was try and fix it. But I also knew I needed time off, and I needed like to start working fewer hours and things like that. So it was things like, you know, it was like I spent a lot of time with Ian and Michelle figuring out like what was taking up so much of my time, and you know, we'd never successfully hired an office manager, and we just got our heads down and were like, let's find an office manager that'll sort that out. Let's find a better accountant. Let's sort that stuff out. And bit by bit, like my workload went down at the same time as I started to get the wind back in myself, stuff, and I was doing a better job. And that process took about a year, I would say. But over the course of that year, Ian and Michelle and I had loads of other chats, and there was this one chat where, you know, we were trying to figure out what my role going forward would be, what a broader COO role would look like now that I'd sort of cleared away a lot of the kind of more grindy, low-level stuff that I've been doing. I was talking, you know, with some significant, genuine enthusiasm about doing a bit more traveling and going and doing some more partnerships, and maybe we need an office in the US and all this kind of stuff. And Ian, who is my best mate, just stopped me and was just like, I know you don't want to do that stuff. It's just, you're just setting yourself up for like, you know, I know you don't like traveling. I know you don't like all this stuff. You know, what are you doing? You don't have to be at this company anymore. And I was like, oh, I hadn't even thought of leaving. Okay. All right, maybe I should leave. And it all just turned really on that chat. And it was absolutely the right call. Ian was spot on. And I, you know, like, it was tough, I know, for him to say that. It was really tough for him to, you know, on some spectrum where you've got like, he fired me to I resigned, it was somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
And we said that I was leaving because I wanted to do something else. I think we said I was going to be a politician. And everyone was like, oh, cool, yeah, wicked.
Okay, you've left your company at this point. Mm-hmm. What did you actually do? What was that first day, week like? You remember?
Day I left, Katie, who was my new girlfriend at that point, she cooked me like a lovely breakfast. And I was like, oh, wow, we're celebrating. I was like, well, yeah, I should be celebrating. I was still caught up in this like mix of like, just your confidence is low. The world looks grayer when you're burned out. You just generally don't take joy in stuff. And as well, I was still grappling with whether, I was leaving under a cloud and whether I'd done a bad job and all this kind of stuff. So it was that was actually quite striking, because Kate was like, you haven't got to go to work anymore. Let's have a lovely breakfast and celebrate. Let's have a glass of champers. And I was and it took me a while to even get back to that kind of like forward-facing mindset. So that was quite striking. I remember that being really like difficult to sort of wrap my head around, just how much I felt like just deadened by the experience of frying myself so hard. And I think it was months before I felt like started to get those ideas again about the future, like, I might do this, might do that. And then I wasn't manic, it's like has an actual diagnosis. I wasn't that, but I was quite like my mind was flitting around thinking, I could do anything. I was quite excitable and all that stuff.
So how long? Were you in the wilderness for a year?
I had started
2 years?
Milkroundabout, so I had to keep doing that every 6 months. And then over the course of the year after I left Songkick, it built a bit of a head of steam, and I started working on it more and more.
So what is Silicon Milkroundabout, for those that don't know?
So it's a jobs fair that we set up for developers to meet startups in London. And we set it up as Songkick because we couldn't find developers. And we especially couldn't get developers from big companies like Google and Amazon to join us, because there wasn't really this idea that there wasn't yet. It was a very nascent idea that there was like a startup scene in London. So you would be going to these people saying, do you want to join my company? And they'd be like, you are 5 people, or you're like a 12-person startup, and you expect me to leave Google to join you? Like, I don't even know what a startup is. Yeah. So we clubbed together, and from the word go, it was really successful little event. And we did it in pubs and small venues around East London for the first year, and then moved to the Old Truman Brewery, which is this massive venue in East London. So I ran it as CEO, my first CEO job, full-time from about 2013, having launched it in 2011 and run it part-time, just like spun up a little team and run an event and spun it all back down, and then we got, me and my co-founder Cristiano basically decided there's real. So Cristiano just started working on it by that point, and we decided, let's do this together. We'll co-found this business together and make it a proper business, because at that point it'd really just been a side project. Mm-hmm. And Ian's a co-founder of it as well, and Songkick were like sort of almost, we treated them almost like the angel investor that had kind of got us off the ground. But we were entirely bootstrapped the whole time, and so we grew it quite slowly, and we grew it to a really good level, like well over $1 million, £1 million a year in revenue, and like really, really high gross profit on the events. And
we were kind of, not really competing with anyone.
We
If I
were
remember
set,
it.
right. We were set.
I mean, I remember it. So it's just someone who's like, when I was 25, looking at tech jobs or tech companies I might want to go into or whatever else. And I just remember it was like the only thing that you could find.
Yeah, it's great, and it still is great. Yeah. And we built something that was really special and still is, and we're all really proud of it. However, 2015, mid 15 through to mid 16. I just made a series of like crunching mistakes that basically drove the business through into administration, from which it was bought by someone I know and I really like, and he actually brought in some of the team that we'd kind of had to make redundant because we'd lost the business. And they now run it.
What was the process of saying, you've just said I made a bunch of decisions that were, crunchingly incorrect, essentially. Did you know that at the time, or did someone give you like an evaluation? Were people feeding this back to you at the time? What was that process?
No, it's very much like hindsight. I mean, you obviously don't run a company into the ground, a perfectly good company into the ground on purpose. I don't mean that to sound flippant either. Like, we thought, what we thought we wanted to do was grow it. So we had this event that was running twice a year in our home market, London, where we knew everybody and we had a good reputation. And we thought, well, if we can replicate this in one more city or 2 more cities, why can't we replicate it in like 100 cities? Like, this could be a really fascinating business.
So like a franchise model.
Possibly. We actually decided the first one we would do would be handmade. We assessed cities like Berlin, Edinburgh, and we decided to go for broke and go and try and do it in New York. So, you know, I'm not saying that was even a mistake, but one mistake we made was neither Cristiano or I moved there. Second is we didn't raise enough money to actually do an international expansion of that scale. Mm-hmm. We went in too hard, too big. Maybe New York was just simply too big a city, but actually probably could have just started small like we did in London and built it up. We overhired. We hired too senior people, i.e. we are overly senior people who were paying too much to. Not they weren't. I mean, they were just senior. We just hired the wrong level of person. And the list will go on. And I think one thing I've kind of discovered talking about it with people is that they're not actually that interested in the what. They're like the why is really important to me, because you're an entrepreneur with all this experience. Like, why did you make those mistakes?
But at the same time, you know, that's a really hard one to discuss, because the whole point of building something that's exciting and fast growing is taking the risks, and the risk either goes right or wrong. And if it goes right, you're a genius, and if it goes wrong.
So I think the real why did I become such a bad CEO and really mess things up, was that me and my co-founder weren't getting on, and that fault line in the business, and the very, very like primary thing we did wrong was didn't deal with that.
I mean, but you seem incredibly aware of it all, and you've obviously had time to reflect. But then, have you had therapy or? Yeah,
I've had. I mean, I think therapy is brilliant.
Yeah,
I think therapy is brilliant. I think talking generally is brilliant. Like, I think trying to just like thrash this out with people is really important. And I have like my wife Katie is brilliant at, you know, she's like, I mean, she's very honest and really smart. So I don't have to worry about like having my thoughts sorted out with her when I'm talking stuff through. She'll often help me sort them out for me. Okay. And be like, oh, well, you know, that's like that thing you said or whatever. So I feel like I've got good people around me, and yeah, I do really, I really take a lot from therapy. I used to do it like every week, and I actually haven't been doing therapy recently. I'll probably start it again at some point. I think one of the main things I get from it is I have all these little behaviors that I would rather change. And if you don't have therapy, or I find if I don't take myself to a room with a person whose job it is to help me change those behaviors, then I'll miss all the little things that would have added up and helped. And crucially, actually, I wasn't having therapy during that whole period. I'd quit my therapist because I decided I didn't love him. I wasn't getting as much as I wanted from that therapist, and then I just didn't get another one, and that ran for the 6 months where most of the key bad decisions were made.
We interrupt this episode to invite you to enjoy a moment of calm. I'm Tamara Levitt, the writer and narrator of the meditations in the Calm app. Amidst the chaos and busyness of life, it's so important to pause. The calm and clarity we gain through meditation is an essential part of what makes a great leader. So take a moment now to close your eyes and bring your attention to your breath. Inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly. Feel your lungs expanding and contracting. And as you take this next breath, feel your whole body relax. And then, when you're ready, open your eyes. To learn more about the Calm app, visit calm.com/secretleaders for a 1-month trial. And now, back to today's guest.
Okay, super relevant.
Yep.
This section is very kindly sponsored by calm.com,
Great.
the meditation app.
also friends with Michael, I believe, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I guess the best.
Who isn't friends with Michael?
Everyone's friends with Michael. It's true. He is the nicest man in the world, and that's also why he was kind enough to help sponsor this section of the podcast, which is all on lessons, mistakes, really like delving deeper into the person and how you spend your time. Really. So, just starting there, what does a typical day look like for Pete?
So my weekends tend to be pretty chilled out. I've got a dog to walk. I've got food to cook, and hopefully friends to see. And I used to be quite rowdy, and I think I've got less rowdy. So during the week, if I'm working, then I really enjoy my work. So at the moment I advise startups, and I don't just advise them. I prefer to just jump in and help. So I'd rather do 2-3 days a week for a few months rather than float above like the startup kind of advising one of the senior team. So interim COO roles, just like jumping in, helping with marketing, whatever needs doing.
And do you think you are going to start another business? Is that an ambition, something you think of? There's a very confident nod there. So
yeah. I feel like, as a career choice, it would be crazy not to, because of the kind of the pace at which you can build reputation and wealth, and done right, that is. So I think there aren't that many opportunities in this world to create that level of kind of personal, or that's that kind of gradient of personal trajectory and family trajectory for you and your family. But the other thing is I really love it, and I think it would be a waste of the learnings and mistakes to turn my back on it. But that, all of that said, I'm not in a massive rush, and I think it could be years till I do it.
Did you have any mentors help you along the way?
Yeah, I've obviously had all the figures involved in Songkick, either at investor or senior team levels. So Ian, Michelle, and the other senior team members on the Songkick management team. I had a brilliant mentor who's now CTO at Moo, called Mary Williams.
Oh, she's supposed to be amazing. Her name pops up everywhere.
Oh, she is top notch, and she's like this incredibly smart person who has spent the time in her 20s and early 30s that we spent in all sorts of ways. She focused that intellectual energy on becoming a great manager, and she is a phenomenal people manager and people thinker, like just amazing. So having that was wicked. She coached us, me and Christiana, through Milkroundabout, and improved our management skills and just general thinking around running a team immeasurably.
Coming back to the balance, as you've just called it, do you meditate?
I do not.
Did you do it for a period? Have you ever been tempted?
I've tried it several times, and immediately kind of learned and benefited from it. The handful of times I've tried it for any length of time, and then I did yoga for quite a long time, only once, twice a week, but again, just felt like cleansed and really pretty different after a session of yoga. So I don't really know why I haven't managed to integrate it into my life. Something that I do is walk my dog a lot, which is, I think, it is pretty meditative. They call you back into the moment a lot, because they'll come over with like a stick, or they'll found something disgusting in a hedge. Oh God, bloody hell. So you never really lose yourself in thoughts, but you are doing like an extended period of time when you're kind of getting recalled back to the moment a lot.
What is the best lesson you've learned along the way that you can share with our listeners?
I think the thing I didn't get when I was a first-time founder was that you have to just basically reinvent yourself every 6 months. You have to be constantly learning what your job is supposed to be and figuring out how the hell you're supposed to do that. And I thought I could just be me and work super hard, and I'd manage to get the job done. But in the end, you just burn out and you don't do a great job.
But do you mean skill up wise, or do you mean personality as well?
Skill up, like make changes in your life. Just actually need to just change how you are working and learning crazy amounts during the period that you're running a startup. If you're a first time founder, I think you actually get that until later on in the cycle as a first time founder. I certainly didn't have. I didn't figure that out
right
for 2 or 3 years.
And what is the best advice you could give looking back now?
Yeah, I would just say don't work as hard. If I was saying something to myself in 2007, I'd say just don't work as hard. Like, you didn't work smarter, learn from people who've done it before, and just don't default to thinking extra hours equals closer to your goals.
What is next for Pete? What space really interests you? I know you haven't necessarily thought about this, but in the Songkick days when you had your thousands of ideas down, do you have a notebook? Do you have something where you're storing ideas and potential things?
I get hung up on an idea and think about it loads, and then eventually, usually, hopefully, I lose like the kind of desire to do it, and that will happen at some point, and then I'll just do that idea. There'll be an idea that I can't get out of my head. But one thing that I've been thinking quite a lot about since last summer is that what has been transformative for me over the years was doing some secondary share sale through at Songkick Series B. Mm. So the 3 founders got about £350,000 each by selling a little bit of our stock when Sequoia invested in the company, and that is much more common in the Valley than it is here. I actually ask people, but I suspect a lot of entrepreneurs don't get the chance to do that here in London. But it has effectively meant I could leave Songkick, not have to worry about money. I could leave Milkroundabout, not have to worry about money. I'm not saying I'm a rich man, but that small amount of secondary, when we'd created all of this millions of pounds of value that people were pumping, that we were making a real play at a big industry, it was absolutely right. We got part of that, even a little bit of it. So that was transformative. And there's funds in the States that go around post Series A, post Series B, or at Series A and B, and basically jump in and say, look, we want to buy some of the founders' stock. The effect of that is either they get their hands on some founders' stock from a really good company, or the existing investors step in and exercise their right of first refusal and end up buying secondary stock off the founders. So it's a win for the founders. It's like a win often for the fund. And it's just such a massive win for the ecosystem, because these founders, if their startups fail or they leave their startups, they don't have to go and get a job and start. So I think that should exist in the UK at some point. I think somebody should do it.
When did you know you were onto something with Songkick?
I think it was how much our early users loved the product, and that was also just really, really exciting to have started this thing without really no idea how to build a tech startup, just running on instinct and learning from the early guys we had like Paul Graham and the other teams on Y Combinator, getting this thing launched, and then just people are like, oh my god, I love Songkick so much, it's great, and they're just all over the world. That was really, 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 really exciting. I can't look back on it other than still feel that excitement of like being 25 and having thousands of people suddenly saying, this is great that you built this.
So it's more the international aspect of like getting it from different countries.
Breadth, and I think the anonymity, like these users, we had no idea who they were and where they were coming from, how they were finding us, and they were just like pumped to have found us and using us and buying tickets and all this stuff that I don't think you can get from a bricks and mortar business. So that was pretty cool. What's
the most daring thing you did on your journey?
So friends who have jobs say, oh, it's really brave that you are an entrepreneur. I think it's really brave. Like, how do you do it? Like, how do you live with the uncertainty and all that stuff? And I actually think that probably I just calibrated that a little bit differently, where the horizon can be 6-12 months, and we're fine with that. So, okay, well, this startup, I know I'm going to be doing this job for 6 months, 12 months, the end of which maybe, hopefully, it's all going to be fine. But if it's not fine, I'll probably just get another job or I'll do something else. And I feel like that is actually, maybe that calibration just being slightly off is what allows you to exist in this state where objectively, apparently, you're being quite bold. In truth, I think maybe we just are not as scared of not having a job as other people would be. So I'm not sure I've answered the question. Yeah. I think I'm maybe just not.
Well, most daring. So you're basically saying that the most daring thing you ever did
is exist in this place that other people find scary.
Yeah. Okay. But so I guess you don't really find anything daring because it's just your natural state.
Maybe. I definitely am not a brave man about, say, heights.
Okay. Fair enough.
There's an argument to say no one really achieves success on their own. So who has helped you on your journey that deserves a massive shout out?
Oh man, I just love my dad. I really mean that. So I worked for him when I first left uni, and he's an entrepreneur, and I could see what it took to build a successful business. I work with him now as somebody who's kind of looped back through 2 of my own companies, and now I work with him as a peer, and that's just a really special thing. And having worked with my dad for like years of my life now, I think that is just a really special relationship, which I'm proud to have made a success of in the way that we have professionally. So he'll probably listen to this and he'll probably tear up hearing that, and rightly so, because I love the old guy.
Okay, final question then. What's changed about you from when you started to who you are now?
I've just simply grown up in loads of ways. Like I am more responsible. I am more careful with people around me. I am more careful with myself, and just generally I'm just less reckless with all of those elements of my life. And I think to an extent that's growing up. I think I'm also just not as distractible and just generally excitable and ready to focus on the next bright shiny thing. All of which is almost like a sort of deflating of like a ball of energy that perhaps I used to be, that ultimately wasn't necessarily the kind of way to live. Exactly. Yeah.
You've been listening to a fantastic podcast interview in a canal boat with the artist formerly known as Prince, aka Pete Finlay, formerly known as Pete Smith of Songkick. So thank you very much for your time, Pete.
Thanks, Dan. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Rich.
Pleasure.
And also thank you to your lovely dog.
Yeah, he's grumbling away under the table.
You've been good, Pilot. Thank you. Next week on Secret Leaders.
If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Be able to describe your business in one sentence. Be really clear about it. And if you can't do that, ask yourself why you can't do that. You cannot build a successful business without knowing how much cash you've got in the bank.
That was next week's guest with a royal honour, in the form of Karen Jones CBE, the co-founder of Café Rouge and the Pelican Group that she sold for a reported £133 million. She's a no-nonsense, direct and experienced founder, mum, wife and board member of many impressive companies you'll know well, including ASOS. Just like any real Brit, though, her passion is pubs. She's owned a lot of them, so if you're into food, drink and hospitality, next week's story is the one for you, so check it out.
Don't miss an episode by subscribing to us on iTunes or Spotify. Just search for Secret Leaders. You can also check out our website at secretleaders.com for show notes and behind the scenes of each interview.
Hi, I'm Simon LaFosse, the founder of LaFosse Associates. We're a young, high-growth and co-owned business, and we're experts in attracting talent. If you want to build a great team, or you just want advice, please get in touch. We run free seminars, and we'd love to see you there. Thanks for your time.
This episode was hosted by Dan Murray, produced by me, Rich Martell, edited by Harry Morton at Lower Street Media, and if you're hearing this, that's probably thanks to Jennifer Osman, our marketing whiz from Canada.